This video is part 2 of 2. In the previous video, we did an open circuit voltage test on the battery. We checked the regulator rectifier, we did a stator test, and determined that a stator needed to be replaced on this bike. To remove the Honda VFR Stator, you will need to remove your left fairing engine cover, remove the radiator overflow tank, unbolt the stator cover, being careful to disconnect the wiring for the O2 sensor, kickstand sensor, and other wiring harness plugs. Gently use a pry bar on the lifting tabs of the cover to move it at a right angle to the engine. There will be strong magnetic forces from the stator rotor drum that'll want to hold the cover in place.
Having removed our stator cover and confirmed visually what we saw in the test, that the stator has got some issues. We see some number of burnt coils here. We have our new stator ready to go. So what we're going to do is remove the old stator after cleaning up the gasket material from the cover, cleaning up the gasket material from the engine side. One thing I want to say about the gasket material particularly is a bike gets a little bit older, gets some miles on it. Give yourself ample amount of time to remove the gasket material. Try to do this as gently as possible, and what I did is I just gave myself an evening after work to remove this gasket material and take my time with it to get it as clean as I could possibly get it before disassembling any further, and then of course washing everything out while the old stator is still in place, because that's just going to wind up going in the recycler anyways. You might as well just make sure you've got all the gasket material off before you go any further. So let's break these loose. There we go. Okay, so this last bolt that holds the wire in place down here to the stator, it has a steel guard that kind of keeps the wires away from the rotating magnetic drum. Was very, very difficult to get at, and my socket Allen key just was kind of rubbing up against the coils and not making a really good firm fit and connection. So what I went to is a standard Allen key, and because it was a little hard to move out, a little seized up, I just used a pipe as a snipe in order to get that off. So that got this free. So now I'm going to remove the 5 bolts that hold the stator in place. And now just free that up, and this should lift right out. And there's the old stator. You see even more damage to the coils there. So just going to inspect the inside of the cover, make sure it's clean, and there's no issues. A little bit of brake cleaner, just make sure that there's no residue, anything that's going to interfere or damage our new stator. Okay, so we're ready to reinstall the stator. We've got our brand new stator out of the package, ready to go. You remember me mentioning that I had a little trouble getting this bolt out, and kind of rounded just the insides of the bolt key slot, Allen key slot, out of this particular bolt. So we're not going to reuse this one. I don't want to have that potentially interfering with somebody else having to change the stator perhaps down the road. I did find one in my bolt bin, that is in good shape, so we're going to use that one instead. So if you look down into the stator cover, you can see there's kind of a routing method to the wires. One of the things I figured out is it's easier to route the wires than it is to first and then bolt the stator down, as opposed to putting the stator in and then trying to fish the wires underneath, because the wires are hidden by the stator coils in there. So we want to start with the wires themselves. Also, there's just a little bit of glue. They use like a hot glue at the factory to put the stator in at the seal point coming out of the stator cover. So you just want to make sure that you get that cleaned out as well. I'm going to do that now. So I'm going to start by laying the stator in and just off of its bolts and positioning the wire down into the stator cover, and then get our wire hold down ready. Now, in the case of the bolts that hold the stator and this wire cover on, I do use a little bit of red Loctite, just a couple of threads worth, just to make sure that everything stays down tight when it comes to putting this back together. So again, we want to make sure our wires are fished down properly, and then put our cover in place. Snug that up for now. Now we just need to rotate the stator and locate the holes, the bolt holes, inside the stator cover. And that looks pretty good. So again, check these bolts over, make sure that there's no issues with them. And we're going to use just a little bit of red Loctite, just enough to give it a little more grip when the stator's installed. Make sure there's absolutely no way these bolts will come out when we don't want them to, but not so much red Loctite that you'll never get them out. Now these bolts are torqued to 12 Newton meters. That's 9 foot-pounds. That's what that is. You just want to do it in a crisscross pattern. And now we're going to finish snugging this one down. That's holding the wires. Can't quite get like I said, adequately in there with my Torx socket, so I'm just going to do this one by hand. Alright, so the stator's installed. Now we just need to put the wiring, locate the wiring inside the cover, and to hold that in place, what we're going to do is use a little bit of RTV silicone, just to get a nice seal going between these rubbers and the cover itself. So I just want to talk real quickly about the plug that's on the stator. That on the VFR you have to fish to the other side of the bike. So in order to do that, to get it around everything that's laying on top or between the two cylinder banks and get it to the other side, you're going to have to remove that plug that's on your stator. And I'm going to show you how that plug works. First off, I'm going to take the old one, and that one's apart. And in order to get these plugs to come off of the connectors, and I'll show you a close-up of the connector there, there is a slot that you see in the top of it that locks into a plastic pin. Some plastic tabs in there that lock into those slots that are on the connectors. So in order to free this up, there's also this basically a lock mechanism. Put some pieces of plastic in behind the connectors so they can't be pulled back out. In essence, you have a string like this of locks that go into the connector, like so. And when it clicks down like that, it's fully locked. Here's the thing, you don't have to pull that all the way out in order to get these pins free. All you have to do is just get it unlocked like that. And basically what you'll see from the backside, the blocks that were holding the connectors in place are now up and free and out of the way. I'm going to just show you how to do this last one. There's the lock in place on this new connector. I just need to get it up and unlocked just that far. Don't need to pull it any further than that. Just need to get it, like I said, unlocked. And then from the front, knowing that the little plastic tab here, you might be able to see it on that one, that plastic tab there is holding the connector in place. What I need to do from the front is pull the connector down, push the connector down and back at the same time, just to get it around that pin. And I'm trying to do this while maintaining some focus with the camera here. And then you'll feel it unhook. Oh, sorry, you'll feel it unhook, and out it comes. There you go. Now the other thing that I did do is as I took these out, I did mark the position. It shouldn't make any difference. Stator's alternating current, so it shouldn't make any difference, but I am going to put these back in exactly the same order that I took them out. And I just simply took a marker and put a mark for position 1, position 2, and position 3. So when I go to put them back together, I'll know what slot they came from. So as we get ready to install the new stator, which is now bolted into the cover, we've got a nice clean surface along here, which our gasket's going to rest upon. On the VFR, there are 2 points where this cover meets up that intersect where the case halves on the engine come together. And it's very difficult to see, but there's basically where the case halves come together right there and equally on the other side. So in those areas, on the engine side, we just have to put some RTV in those areas before we put the gasket on. And that's just to make sure that no oil seeps out through those cracks. It's just something that Honda does as part of the manufacturing process, so we're going to continue to do that when we replace this gasket. You don't need a whole lot, just basically a dab. You just want to make sure that you don't get any inside. So we have our new gasket ready to go on. And the reason I'm putting the gasket on over here is that these locating pins on the engine will hold the gasket in place when we put the cover on. And of course we had to have the RTV on the engine side. Okay, now the other nice thing about the RTV is it'll help hold the gasket on place as well while we put the cover back on. Okay, we're about to set our stator on place, and as these coils get close to the rotor inside, it's really going to want to pull it in. The magnetic power is quite impressive. So you want to be careful, and you want to guide the stator on and try to avoid the coils getting damaged. And boy, is that powerful. But take your time at this stage so that you get the coils in the stator drum and the rotating magnetic drum and not damaged. It'll literally suck it out of your hands when you go to put the stator back on. So now we've got everything aligned, our holes aligned, and we can start putting our bolts back in. So now we've got these bolts tightened up, ready to torque them. Torque spec on these bolts are the same as the stator inside, which was 12 Newton meters and is 9 foot-pounds. The only thing you want to do is just do this in a crisscross pattern and make sure that you get them all snug. Go around a second time after your initial torque setting and make sure that you've got them all snugged up. Sometimes you can find you get additional torque out of the bolts after they initially set. So if you remember the initial test on the stator, if any of the leads go to ground, in other words, if there's continuity between any of the stator leads and the ground on the bike, it's an indication that the stator coils are bad. So just going to check now that we've got our new stator in and we have nothing going to ground. So again, tells us that we have a good stator, because if any of those had gone to ground, you would have heard a noise like that. So now we can start fishing our wire through to the other side so that we can hook it up. Now when I removed the old stator and brought the wire back to this side, I did hook it up to a fishing wire that I've run through. So just something to remember when you're going to pull the stator out is that when you're fishing the wire, when you're gonna have to pull these wires from the other side anyways. Attach a fishing wire to it of some kind. This is just a piece of wire that I had I cut off from a spool, and just wrap it around, tape it up, and that way when you pull the stator off, you've got this wire sticking out the other side, and when you go to put the new one back in, you can just pull the wire in reverse order and these wires will find their way back. So now we need to reinstall our plug. And as I said, I'm going to put these back in the order in which they came out. Make sure that the connectors are seated. You've heard each one of them click. And then bring the lock bar back down on the connector until it clicks and is all the way in. And now we can plug it back in and hook up the stator to the rest of the bike. Okay, so we've hooked everything back up. Put most of the bike back together, and want to make sure that we've done this correctly, that we've got a good stator, good voltage regulator now, and we'll go back to the original test that we had, which was testing the battery voltage. Charged battery, you see that this battery is putting out about 13.2 volts. So, time to start it up, see what happens with the voltage. happy with the voltage test. What we saw was when we started the bike, there was a little drop in voltage and then a steady increase back up. Brought the bike to 5,000 RPM. There was a big jump in voltage. Turned the high beam on, saw a drop in voltage, and then again bring that bike back to 5,000 RPM and the voltage come right back up. But never did it go below 13 volts, which is really, really key here. If you remember before, the voltage dropped significantly below 12 and just kept dropping all the way down. So very happy that this is going to work. We've got a new stator that is running perfectly and new voltage regulator, which again is charging the battery.